Okay. By the way, you guys are going to be famous. You know that, right? You're all over YouTube. We have already 70 people saw these videos. So I had a student last time we did this class. His name was Epstein. He was constantly, discussing, and I would call him by name, and he was like, "I'm going to be so famous at the end of this class." So just so you know, you guys are going to be celebrities by the end of the semester, especially if you contribute. Don't let this stop you. Okay. So, like I said, this is much better because this is a discussion class. This is a lab. We can't be in this classroom, this horrible classroom over there. So I see there's no one here, right? So I'm hoping it'll stay that way and that we can come here on Tuesdays. And then on Thursdays, I believe there's a room down the hall, which is also free. So we'll be kind of a mobile class. Is that okay? Are you good? So just in case you don't see, in case you forgot, just go around until you find us. Hello, class. Oh, wow. Okay. 1, 2, and
Just us.
okay, just here. Okay. Well, there's two choice seats. And then there's a couple over there too. Yeah. Just like in the good old days.
When did we sit like that?
In the last Play-Doh in the Bible.
That's his seat? Okay, we're gonna.
All right. No good old days. Cool. All right. So like I was telling them, we're gonna be here on Tuesdays, hopefully, and down the hall on Thursdays.
Okay.
It's gonna be a mobile class. Okay, so today, one last introduction. You've been very patient. So I have to introduce the Book of Genesis. This is kind of also more of a Pentateuch introduction. So Pentateuch is I think it's Latin name for the 5 books of Moses. So how many of you have started reading like Genesis, Exodus? Let me see. Raise your hand if you've, okay. What have you read so far?
Just in Genesis.
Okay,
I haven't read Exodus.
okay. Good. So Exodus is your next, before next time. You've read Exodus. What about you?
I read like halfway through Genesis. I got to the part where like the Tower of Babel.
Oh, very good. That's excellent. Okay. Um,
Part.
good. Try to finish Genesis by Thursday. That'll be already really good. And then you?
Just finished reading the whole book of Genesis.
Okay, so great. Now just do Exodus and you should be good. What about you?
I basically know all the beginnings, so I'm gonna start reading from the whole.
Okay, excellent. And you probably familiar with the book also.
Yes.
And what about you? Nothing. Okay, so next time read at least from 1 to 11.
Okay.
The assigned reading. And you guys, how's your reading?
I started also, I'm up to like the first couple of pages.
Okay,
since we're
got
writing
it.
over the days.
Okay, excellent. So try to really get the nice culture. Read every night a little bit. What about you, Romero?
I started and then I forgot about it.
Yeah.
So I have to pick it up.
I feel you guys, I'm supposed to memorize a psalm and I just can't get to it. I don't know. There's no time.
Which one is for?
37 for myself
Oh.
to help me get through the day. So
Okay.
it's a good one. It's a long one, but I'm like, I can't find a minute. Like it's insane. What about you?
I'm comfortable with both of them, but I reread them.
Okay, excellent. And you?
I didn't read.
Okay, start reading Book of Genesis. Excellent. Okay, so great.
Do we have an assignment for next time?
Not yet. I'll tell you at the end of class.
Did you say Rega?
What?
Did you say
No,
Rega?
I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I don't know what you heard. Okay, remember to raise your hand before talking. Very important. Okay, introduction to the Pentateuch. So we're gonna focus on the first 11 chapters. Why? And well, obviously why? Because these are foundational texts when it comes to the issue of violence. We have a lot of violence in those texts. We have the oppression of women, at least the way the text has been read in Genesis 3. You have the story of the fall and the woman being blamed for the fall. So that's the first moment of violence. You have the violence of Cain against Abel. So you have violence, man against man. You have the violence of the flood, which is when God destroys the world. And then you have the violence of the Tower of Babel, which we're going to talk about, the totalitarian violence of the Tower of Babel. So yeah.
Is route 247?
347.
Okay.
Yes, good question. Okay. So yeah.
You mentioned there's something about a song by me.
A song.
Or
Well, that was me trying to
Oh, it
memorize
was
by
song.
myself a
Oh,
song. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's something else. Yeah. Okay, great. So So these are foundational texts for violence, but also they're interesting because they're very different from the rest of the book of Genesis. And the reason is that they're actually very ancient texts that predate when Moses, started to redact, right? You're familiar, of course, Moses didn't write the whole thing. He compiled some of these stories from what he had heard from probably his community. So he's a compiler. He's also a redactor. Of course, there is a clear unity of style. There's a coherence. You can sense there's one author. But the first 11 chapters are stories. The language of these stories are very different from Genesis 12 on. So you can sense stylistically there is a difference. The language used is different, and also mostly the language. So we know it's not him writing those stories. It's him having compiled those stories from a much earlier source. And when you start to read other sources from Sumer, from Babylon, and let me give you a little idea. I'll give you a map here on the board if I can find a chart, which I won't be able to. Ah, yes, I no, sorry. I should probably sit at the head of the table, sorry, but maybe I'll try next time. But you have, give you a map here. Here's Turkey. Okay. Israel. And then you have all this area, Mesopotamia. It's terrible, isn't it? Okay. Over here is the beginnings of civilization, right? Mesopotamia, which comprise one of the first important empires is Sumer, which later becomes Babylon. Okay, these are the main words you need to know. Israel, Sumer, Babylon, and then ancient Mesopotamia. So, so we have, when you start to look at these very ancient texts from Sumer, from Babylon, which predate the writing of the Pentateuch, they are around 3000 BC, right? You read texts from 3000, 2000 BC, whereas Moses, of course, was writing in 1200 BC, right? Or was alive 1200 BC, right? So these texts, when you look at the language and stories of these texts, you have similarities between these texts and the first 11 chapters of Genesis. I'll give you an example. How many of you have heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh? One. Okay, two. Okay. Nobody else? Epic. I'll write it down because this is a very important ancient story. So we have the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Enuma, the right writing here. I think it's the Enuma Elish, but I want to make sure. Let's see, where did I write about this? Look for me eventually. Stick to the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have the mention of the flood, right? You have the mention of a tree of life, or a plant of immortality. In the writings on Inanna, right? The goddess Inanna. So you have several writings around the goddess Inanna. So, the name. Sumerian goddess. Yeah, connections between her stories and the story of Adam and Eve, right? So you have a lot of writings that dating very, very ancient writings from Sumer, mostly, which connect in the language and in the content, the stories with our first 11 chapters, right? So we know these are very ancient stories. And so in order to truly understand them, we have to read them not just according to the biblical context, but we have to go deeper into the ancient Near Eastern context in order to understand them, right? We have to get into the worldview of the ancient Near East. By the way, ancient Near East, that's that region over there, right? Israel, Sumer, Babylon, Mesopotamia, and so forth, right? So that's what I'm going to do here today. I'm going to go into the ancient Near Eastern view, and then armed with this view, we're going to be able to decipher the text much better, because these texts belong actually to that literature. They're in the Bible, but they're much closer philosophically, linguistically, to the ancient texts of Mesopotamia. Make sense? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to look at 1, 2, 3 things. I'm going to look at the views on the gods, how they view the gods. So both Sumer and Babylon, I'm going to look at that, right? So just to give you a little history, very vague history. 3000 BC, you have Sumer. These are the first, this is the first civilization that we know of. There's earlier civilizations, but these guys had writing, they had architecture, so we have traces of them, right? So that's the very first, one of the first civilizations in this region. And they were actually a matriarchal civilization. They had a much more important female goddesses than male gods, right? So there was a clear matriarchal worldview in ancient Sumer, which we'll talk about a bit. And then, of course, they were invaded by a people who were actually descendants of Shem. They're Semites who came in and took over the region and created the Empire of Babylon, which you've all heard about probably, right? Babylon is referred to also in the New Testament. Is, you know, Christianity uses that metaphor. So we have to understand Babylon, I think, to understand a lot in the biblical text. We have to understand that civilization. Why? Because the biblical civilization very often opposes the civilization of Babylon. There's an intention to distinguish themselves from Babylon. Okay, so we're going to talk about both those cultures. So Babylon comes later, takes over the civilization of Sumer, keeps the same, everything is already built. They just change the names and they change the names of the gods, right? So Inanna becomes Ishtar, right? And then they have some new gods, you know, that pop up. But Babylon's going to be much more patriarchal. It's really the end of matriarchy with the Empire of Babylon. And then after Babylon, you have, of course, still happening in another region, you have, of course, Israel, the people of Israel, who are, of course, in conflict with the Canaanites. That's another people you need to know about, Canaan, right? So put the name, it's not the real name in the Bible. In the Bible, this is Canaan, right? And so the Hebrews come from Mesopotamia, right? They traveled all the way here. So Abraham, right, started over here, traveled all the way here. He grew, he had children, grandchildren, then they moved to Egypt, slaves for 400 years, and then moved back into Canaan. And that's when all the wars are starting to take place that we're going to study, right? But right now we are, as we enter the book of Genesis, we are over here in the creation. Who knows where it is? We have the creation of the world, and then you have Abraham who begins his journey. So we're at the very beginning of the formation of the Hebrew people, with Abraham coming from Sumer, not yet Babylon, right? Abraham is a Sumerian who traveled west to Canaan. Yes.
Hebrew rock, right?
Exactly.
Modern-day rock,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Thank you. So Sumer, Babylon, this is modern day Iraq, Iran, right? That's kind of where I put it. Syria, no, Iraq. Yeah, for sure, Iraq. Yeah, Syria is a north, and so that's the Assyrians, right? So it's a little different. Okay. Great. Are we ready? Any questions on the geography, the geopolitics? Okay, great.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
After the flood, right? When Noah was supposed to make like the repopulation, was Canaan, Sumer, those places that were removed, like after
Yeah.
Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
And then quickly,
And so Noah had 3 sons,
Mm.
Shem, Ham, Japheth. Ham had a son called Canaan, right? And we won't talk about this, but I'll say it now, because how many of you have heard of the curse of Ham? Anybody?
Mm.
You have? You have? Actually, there's no curse of Ham. There's a curse of Canaan. So Ham, so he had 3 sons. Japheth became the ancestor of the Greeks and, you know, kind of Southern Europeans. Shem became the ancestors of the Muslims, the Jews. Ham became the ancestors of Africans, among other tribes, right? And so there was a story which you'll read, you might have read, with Noah, if you read already the text, where Noah gets angry at his 3rd son, Ham, and curses not him, but his son Canaan. But people have used this, and the curse is this: for now on you will be a slave to your brothers, right? People have used this, distorted it to justify slavery, right? They have said, see, Ham is cursed. He's supposed to be a slave. It's intrinsic. So everybody who's from Africa is actually essentially, right, made, right, ontologically supposed to be serving everyone, right? But they miss the text. The text he never curses Ham, who is the ancestor of African people. He curses Canaan, who is the son of Ham, yes, but it's Canaan. And Canaan That's the people who populated the land of Israel and who were conquered, right, by the Hebrews. So I just wanted to bring that up because this has been used. You see how it's been distorted, right? There was never, you see, they thought, they knew there was a curse of Ham. There was never a curse of Ham, right? But it's floating around because people have been using that, distorting the text in order to justify bondage, right? So we won't study that text, although we could have, now that I ruined it. We could have looked at it, and we will briefly. Okay, so where was I? Okay, any other questions before we get into the worldview of the ancient Sumer and Babylon? Okay, all right, the view on the gods. Let's look at that. So both the Sumerians and the Babylonians view the gods. Yeah, I thought I had something else here that's funny. These notes are funny. Here we are. Whew, almost died. Okay, yes, okay, all good. I found my notes. Okay, first thing we have with Sumer and Babylon is polytheism, which is very different from the biblical context, right? You have many gods, and you have many gods. And what's interesting is that these gods are often fighting. And you have, particularly when it comes to the creation of the world, we're going to look at that. You have the, you're welcome to sit there if you want. Yeah. So you have, for example, when the world is created, in one of the ancient Babylonian narratives, you have a war between two gods, and one defeats the other. And then you have the creation of the world, right? So you have this polytheism, often they're fighting, and often you have gods of chaos and gods of order. That's very interesting. This is important to remember because we're going to see how the biblical text subverts that, right? So it's very important to see there's often a god of order fighting against a god of chaos in order to reestablish order. For example, you have probably, I'll have to sit somewhere else next time because I keep on getting up. You have to stay. No. Yeah, the god Marduk. This is Babylon. Babylonian epic. Marduk versus Tiamat. Right? So these are two gods. This is the story of creation in the ancient Near East in Babylon. You have the god Marduk, who is a male god, who fights against the sea serpent, who is a female, Tiamat. And he conquers the sea serpent, and the world is built on that, right? So when we read when you read the Genesis story, the creation story in the book of Genesis, you're going to see there's no such thing as two gods fighting. There's one God creating peacefully, right? So this is important. We'll talk about this a kind of conquest of the female by the male in Babylon, which is already happening on the level of the gods, right? So what's interesting is that in the biblical text, of course, you have only one God. And so because there is the intention to have only one God in the biblical text, there is a monotheistic intention. What God is often going to be depicted as is as the God of both order and chaos, death and life, right? Now we have to be very subtle here, right? When God says of himself, I am the God of death and life and the God of order and chaos, I'm going to argue that he's not necessarily saying that he controls death or that he has anything to do with death or destruction. That's what I'm going to argue. We're going to see in the course of the class why. But one can argue that what he's actually saying is that I'm the only God around here, right? There's not a God of chaos that I am conquering. You follow me? There's just me in control of everything. In order to highlight the monotheistic, God has to then overtake all of the other forces for himself, even though he might not necessarily be the God of death. You follow me? I'm going to show that over and over again in the class, but for now, I'm giving you a hint. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I know you don't like this leaving in the middle of like class, but can I use the bathroom?
Yes, don't tell me next time. It's better you don't tell me. That's even more disturbing. Okay, yes, you can use the bathroom. I'm not gonna, ideally no, but yes. Okay. Good. So you got that. This is subtle, is important, right? Because many people say, oh yes, he controls both death and life, therefore he's affiliated with death. One of the arguments I'm going to give in the course of this class is that God cannot be affiliated with death, and we're going to see why. But for now, he's taking both to himself because he's trying to show there's not a God of chaos that I'm trying to fight here. I'm the only one. By the way, sadly, Christianity has separated again, has made two gods again. You have Satan and you have God fighting, right? And that in a way is it should make any monotheistic uncomfortable. There's not Satan who is powerful and then God who is powerful and they're fighting. Satan is nothing, right? He doesn't even, he's a shadow, right? In a monotheistic context, right? God is in full control of Satan, right? So this idea that you have again in Christianity, perhaps under the influence of Greek thought, that there's a Satan who's very strong and a God and they're fighting, you know, and one is going to win and sometimes the other one wins, is not a monotheistic concept, is a dangerous concept, is not a biblical concept, right? So we have to be careful. So anyways, that's in this context where we're trying to really crystallize monotheism. God is going to say, I'm both Marduk and Tiamat. I have both under me, right? Make sense? So we'll come to that. So I wanted to mention that. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing, polytheistic. Second distinction, still on the level of the gods. Both Sumerians and Babylonians would see human beings are created to serve the gods. That's the role, right? So basically the stories go like this. You have the gods sitting around and they were served by some, you know, sub-gods, right? You know, they were served food and drink and the sub-gods rebelled. That's one of the stories that is told. And they didn't want to serve the gods anymore. And the gods were like, well, who's going to serve us now? And so they created the humans and made them very subhuman, like made them very, like there's a very inferior creature that they created in order to serve them their bread and their beer, right? So beer was kind of the main produce there. So that's why human beings were created according to both the Sumerian and Babylonian epics, right? They were created, so they were kind of like slaves or robots, you know, that were created in order to strictly serve the gods. Now, it's so interesting because when you read the creation story, and some of you already have done that now, which is good, you will notice that it's the reversal of that. Did anybody catch the reversal in the creation story? Where is it? Tell me.
For Adam and Eve.
Yep.
God created Adam and Eve in this perfect world where he gave them, well, not the perfect world, the Garden of Eden, where everything is for them and
Exactly.
everything is bountiful without any harm, pain. and
Exactly.
Also without knowledge.
And the key is that everything is for them. In other words, instead of God creating humans to serve him, in the book of Genesis, in the biblical context, God in fact creates humans that he may serve them. So instead of humans making food for God, like in the Babylonian and Sumerian context, in the creation story, God is giving them food. He's the one. It's a profound, powerful, you know, reversal. Instead of the humans feeding him, he's feeding the humans. And you have a key word in that story, which is Natan, N-A-T-A-N in Hebrew, which means to give, to give, to give. God is giving the food to the humans rather than the humans giving the food to God. So very often, right, you have in the biblical text the knowledge of these stories and the reversal of it, right, on purpose. So you have a very different story here where God, you have also the contrast, still the same idea of God being served or God serving. You have a contrast between the garden and the ziggurat. Garden versus ziggurat. What is a ziggurat? Who knows? Who's delving into ancient mysteries? Yes, go ahead.
I think it was like the ancient temples and they were built
Yeah.
kind of triangularly, like there was a series of steps that would lead up.
Oh, you won. Very famous. Like the Aztecs. Yeah, they have the same thing, same structure. It's interesting, right? So everybody knows this structure? Did I draw it? Well, it looks like a boat. It's not supposed to look like a steamer. Let me draw that. That's a kind of pyramid, right? Oh, this is a nice one. Yeah. So this is what we found archaeology, right? In the archaeology, this is kind of like pyramids that you find interestingly also in the Mayan and Aztec culture, same structures, right? These are temples that were built for the gods. Notice how they go up, right? In the context of the biblical context, there's no such thing. There's only a garden, right? God coming down to plant a garden versus humans going up to feed the gods. You see, so there's already, right, just reading this Sumerian Babylonian literature and being familiar with the biblical text, you already start to see all these contrasts, right? And see how God is marking himself apart. He's demarcating himself from these other gods, right? Okay. So that's very important, this idea. I want you to really memorize this idea of God coming down, God serving versus humans going up and humans serving God, right? We are shifting, we are flipping it here, right? And by the way, we've forgotten this, right? If you go to any religion, it's all about what we should do for God, right? It's never about what God can do for us. And when we think like we're forgetting the ancient way of things, the ancient order that was established, that it's not us who serve God, it's God who serves us, right? It's a completely different worldview. Yes.
Wanted to make a similarity to what you were saying, like the Old Testament, the way of prayer is to stand straight. So you serve God in a straight
I
position.
love that. I love that.
And in polytheistic versions of prayer, you would have to go on the ground.
Yes.
A lot of times play with stone and do stuff on the ground.
I love that.
So it
Yeah.
has a very big distinction.
Absolutely. Right. So in addition, one second, in addition to the humans being served by God, humans are equal to God. I mean, there's not equal, obviously, but I mean, we are equal partners. Let's put it this way. We are called to be equal partners with God and to stand before God, not to prostrate before God. Prostration is a pagan notion, right? In many ways. Standing is the true way of prayer. In fact, in the synagogue, you never stand except once a year. I mean, you never prostrate except once a year, which is on the Day of Atonement, where there's this prostration, but it's unique only then, right? And so that's a statement to say that the human being is not some sub creature, right? They're supposed to be standing before God, right? Any questions over there? Yes, you had a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Wasn't the human being created to serve God?
Not here. Later it becomes like that, right?
What's not here? What do you mean?
In the creation story, you don't have this notion of humans serving God. In the creation story,
What Bible?
any Bible.
The Old Testament?
Yes. Go look at Genesis 1, the creation story. In Genesis 1, you have a clear intention of God serving humans. Later, though, you're right. Later, with Moses, with the book of Exodus, with Mosaic law, you go back to human beings serving God in the
What
temple.
about the fact that human beings were created? God wanted to better the world. And we're all vessels of God in bettering the world.
Yeah.
Where does that come in?
When we are given our task, finally. So we're created. So God's not yet. So in Genesis, when God serves us and creates us, gives us food, then we are given the task to serve, but not God, to serve the world. Avodah, avad, which is used to God, the human being will both till and tend the earth. This is the translation, loose translation. One of the words means serving. So we don't serve God, we serve the world. It's very different. Be careful, right? We have these, floating ideas we've received from the context, but when you go to the text, it's a very different reality, right? What was you guys' question?
No, you said once a year. We
We're trying to figure out
if
if
it was twice a year.
Okay, the details. Okay, is it twice a year?
I argued it was the Shabbat because we sit, but I think that it's either
That's not a
once on
biblical-
Yom Kippur and once on Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, maybe in that context,
Yeah.
right? In the context of repentance. Yeah, that could be. Okay, great. So, where was I? Yes. Okay, so make sure you see this reversal, right? It's very powerful. When you go back to the story of the creation, and you will see this, right? Which we won't go into too much detail because we'll focus on the woman. Good. Maybe we will. We'll see. Okay, third difference between the gods, the Sumerian gods and the God of the Bible. In Sumer, Babylon, the gods, they're focused on themselves. They have their drama going on. They have their, high school stuff, high school dramas going on, love, war, so forth. They're quite indifferent to the destinies of mankind, right? There's an indifference to what humans are doing, because humans are very one-dimensional being in those contexts. They're just these kind of sub-creatures, sort of robots supposed to serve them. So they're not very interesting, right? It's a totally different story, right? When you start to look at the book of Genesis, read the book of Genesis, you see a God who is actually very involved in human destinies, extremely involved. But it's interesting because he doesn't get involved as an authoritarian figure until much later. So God as an authority figure comes with Moses, doesn't come before. It's very interesting, right? So Moses comes in the book of Exodus. As long as you're reading the book of Genesis, God is not an authority figure giving commandments, judging, punishing. This is not the focus, right? It's a very different type of God. God, on the contrary, is a kind of partner in crime. There is a kind of God, you will notice God is kind of, he's more seen as an activator of human destiny. He's there, you know, behind the scenes. Sometimes he tries to have a conversation. Most of the time he's instigating situations, provoking things. And then that's what you're kind of seeing. Yes.
Is the punishment not from the book, from the story of Noah? God intervenes.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that because I don't believe there is a punishment there. But we'll go. Wait for me.
Okay.
We'll see. You'll see why in a bit, right? But in general, right? So yes, that's a good question, but I'm going to read it differently than as a punishment, and we'll see how, right? So that's very important. Make sure you jot this down, right? That you have that God as an authority figure, giving his law, commanding things, and then judging sin, punishing transgression. This is a much later concept, comes with Moses. In the book of Genesis, you have a God who is much more, and I'll say it again so you can jot it down, an activator of human destiny. So he's behind the scenes, creating situations, right? Trying to start conversations, really attempting to steer destinies, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding. And so that's one important thing. I'll give you an example, right? How he is an activator and not an authority figure. God in the book of Genesis is not a God who emits commands. He's a God who asks questions, right? In the book of Exodus, God is, a kind of, really saying command after command after command. But in the book of Genesis, God is simply asking questions. Look at the first mistake that human beings make. They eat the fruit. And God, it doesn't come down with thunder and, fire and brimstone and thou hast sinned, right? No, he says, where are you? Where are you? I don't feel you close to me anymore, right? Where are you? I feel a distance has happened. Where are you? I feel a separation. Why? What happened? That's what's happening. You can sense the woundedness, perhaps, in the question, right? How you are with friends and then you feel like cold and you're like, where have you been, right? This is what God is saying. He's wounded more than angry, right? He's like, where are you? And then Cain kills Abel. Again, a very incisive question to Cain. Where is your brother? He's not saying, thou hast killed your brother. Let me now, destroy your life. No, where's your brother? Kind of trying to provoke in Cain a beginning of sensibility, right? Cain is a tough guy, right? There's really no room in Cain. We're going to study Cain, right? It's kind of trying to awaken something in Cain. Where's your brother? Right? And so forth. And then he talks to the patriarch. So you see a God trying to awaken, activate, and so forth, rather than a God, coming down from above. So that's what you're seeing. And then you see a God who kind of goes along humanity, right? He's kind of moving with us and kind of transforming. When we mess up, there's a kind of intervention, a transformative intervention. Let me explain first, and then I'll give you an example. I believe that the God of the book of Genesis especially is a very different God than what we are used to. We are used to God as a judge who judges iniquity and punishes iniquity. But in the book of Genesis, God is much closer to a creator. God is a creative rather than judgmental. And so a creative God, think of any artist. You see something unshaped, unformed. What are you immediately excited about when you see something without form? So it's like, now I'm going to make something out of this, right? This is why women date, losers. They love the there's no shape, that they can shape that man, right? Everybody's laughing, you know what I'm saying, right? This is something that we're such creative, we're creative, right? So it's the same thing with God. God sees our mistakes, God sees our transgressions, and I swear to God, I'm sure of it, he gets excited. He's like, chaos. Let me see what I can do with it. and he gets to work and he transforms our situations, right? This is such a powerful concept and unique to the book of Genesis. Later, you have more of a God who's like, you sin, paf, right? But in the book of Genesis, you have a God who's like excited and who gets kind of activated by the chaos that we create. So we mess everything up, and God gets excited because he's creative and he's like, ooh, let me see what I can do with this. We have an example of this in the story of Joseph, which you maybe have read already. It's chaos. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. He ends up, yes?
Isn't it punishment on like on Eve's end?
On what?
On Eve's end, like when she ate the apple.
Ah, well, look at this text. We're going to look.
It's considered punishment.
It is. We've read it as a punishment, but the text you will see, there is no punishment. You'll see. I'm so excited. You guys have all the wrong ideas in your heads. It's perfect. I'm like, God, I can do something with this. Yes.
I mean, similar to the topic.
Mm.
I mean, because you say it's not punishment, but I feel like because in the story it also mentions the tree of life in the garden. Since they had fallen from God after eating the apple, if they did eat of that tree of life, I guess they would have been eternally with sin.
Yes. So yes, he takes away the tree of life, but is that a punishment?
I would say sending them away would be the better option.
That's what he did. He sends them away, right? So, but we have to see, right? Is it a punishment or is something else going on, right? So, but we're so used to this punitive approach, which is very Western, right? Look at our jail system; it's all just punish, right? No redemption, just die in jail, right? So, we're not used to a different approach, right? But there is a different approach here, which we'll see, of course. So, I'll give you an example: the story of Joseph. How many of you have gotten that far to the story of Joseph? Right? You remember his brothers sell him into slavery. He's in Egypt, and then he rises and he becomes the highest power in the land. And then there's a famine where his brothers are living and they come for help and there's a reunion, right? So, but it's a tragic story. It's a mess. The brothers they want to kill him, then they sell him into slavery. I mean, it's terrible. And so Joseph tells them towards the end of the story, he says, you guys meant this for evil, but God meant it for good. In other words, this is the Genesis God, right? There's an intention for evil coming from wherever, mostly human beings. And God will take that intention and he will flip it into good. That's creative. That's creation. That's a creative God. Any artist can take anything that's ugly and make it beautiful. That's what is an artist, right? An artist is one who is capable of taking something which is ordinary, which is trivial, which is even forgotten, and make it into something extraordinary. And that is what God systematically does with our lives, at least in the book of Genesis, and of course, can overflow, right, into our own life. So that's what we see here, which is very unique, right, that we're not used to, because later, yes, you have a more punitive God, a more authoritarian God, but this is with the coming of Moses, whom I believe is influenced by Egyptian thoughts, right, which is very vertical. But here in the book of Genesis, completely different story, right? It's very interesting. God is walking alongside man. Here's another example of a creative transformation. Remember Abraham, if you read that far, he was supposed to have a child and he was supposed to wait for that child. And he gets to his 90s and he's like, I think I need to do something. So he gets with the servant of his wife, Hagar. They have a child. And so what's interesting, the text marks the shift. So in the beginning, you have God promising Abraham, I will make you the father of a great nation, one great nation through the son, right? That God was supposed to bring Abraham. Okay, this happens. Now there's Ishmael. God doesn't miss a beat. He comes back and says the following, I will make you the father of many great nations. It's a powerful, God is just like, doesn't miss a beat, just continues, makes it better, right? You were, instead of saying, you ruined everything while you went with this, now it will be horrible, there will be war in the Middle East till the end of days, right? He doesn't say that. He says, oh, okay, there's an extra son in there, all right, let's bring him in, right? And let's make everybody be part of the promise. Ishmael, Isaac, whoever else, right? Let's bring them all together and let's make this father of many nations. And that's how God works, right? He's like, he's following us, but at the same time, he's ranging, right? Thank God, right? So that's what we're seeing over and over again in the book of Genesis, right? This transformative, creative power of God, which takes chaos, mistakes. That was a mistake, right? Abraham didn't trust God. He didn't wait. That should have been a huge mistake, which ended up, you know, with huge consequences. No consequences, just good transformation. Yes.
You said that Abraham didn't trust God, or he just trusted Sarah's interpretation of what God told Abraham.
You could say that, absolutely, because there's room for human initiative, right? But then the rest of the story, you see God insisting, nah, it's gonna be from your own flesh, right? You see what I'm saying? So God, it seems that,
After he already.
yes,
But
yes,
God- he
yes,
already
but God
told us
sticks,
that.
yes, but God sticks to plan A, that he's gonna be from your own flesh. You see what I mean? So Sarah might have interpreted, but she perhaps misinterpreted, perhaps not, because God is like pretty cool with it, right? So we can go both ways. We can say she misinterpreted, or we can say, well, she enriched the narrative. You can say that too, right? There's room for that in this context of Genesis, right? God in the book of Genesis is very inclusive and very flexible. It becomes a little different later, although I think he maintains those traits, right? But they're not as visible later. Make sense? Kind of. A little. Okay. Okay, good. All right. Any questions on the gods versus the God of the Bible? Any comments or questions before I continue to the cosmos? Yes.
I feel like that type of polytheistic belief stretches into a lot of like other beliefs, especially like the Greek gods, Norse gods. It's all very similar.
Yeah.
You have that evil force and good force.
Exactly. Yeah, these gods, they're I mean, it's attention to like, I'm the only one that matters, right? Okay, let's go to cosmology, the cosmos, God's view on the cosmos or the world, ordered world. Cosmos in Greek means ordered world. Cosmos, you can spell it any way you want, doesn't matter. It's a Greek word. Okay. So we need to be aware of this to understand stories like the flood. I think this is the story of the flood. So listen carefully. In the ancient Near East, including Greece, this is also, you find this in Greece, there was the idea that chaos is the original material of the world. The forces of chaos are everywhere. Then there's some type of God comes in and makes order out of chaos. But the forces of chaos never disappear. They simply are pushed to the edge of the cosmos, of the ordered world. You follow me? Right? So so the chaos is not destroyed. The chaos is pushed to the edge of the ordered world. And there's always the risk of these forces of chaos to come back, to seep back into the ordered world, right? So in order to prevent that, the gods create the law. Every single nation has a law. You have the Ma'at in Egypt, M-A-A-T. You have the Me in Sumer, M-E. You have the Nomos in Greece, N-O-M-O-S, right? So these are, and then the Torah in the Jewish context, right? You always have the law, which is the responsibility of humans to keep carefully. Once you start to move away from this blueprint that the gods give us, right, or God gives us, the forces of chaos starts to seep back in automatically. This is the cosmology of the ancient Near East. You follow? So this is very helpful in my view to read in a different way the story of the flood, right? Because and we'll look at this, right? But I want you to keep this in mind. This is very important that when you have destruction, right? When the forces of chaos come in and start to destroy the world from within, this is because human beings moved away from the blueprint of the gods, right? And so we are really the ones who are responsible for whether the world remains ordered or whether the forces of chaos start to seep back in. We are the ones who hold the world in order. We are responsible for the ordered world. We are given that responsibility. The main individual who is in charge of this is the king. In the ancient Near East, the king's duty was not to get wealthy and have many wives, and the king's only duty in the ancient Near East was to protect the cosmos, to protect the ordered world, to make sure that his people lived in a way that was in harmony with the laws of the gods, right? Which were all the same. These laws is always about justice and all of them. It's not just the Bible who came up with justice and helping the poor and the oppressed and so forth. This is everywhere. you read every single legal code, and they have the same notion of be careful not to oppress the poor, help the widow, be with the orphans, don't, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, right? These are the same laws that you see everywhere. It's not a biblical invention, right? But these laws are fundamental in order to keep the forces of chaos at bay. That's why, and the king is responsible for the implementation of the law in the land. You follow? Yes.
Gonna be on any exam you give us, what were the three different?
Okay, yeah, sure.
How-
So Egypt has the Ma'at, M-A-A-T. Sumer has the Me, M-E. It's all the same word, right? And then the Greeks have the nomos, N as in Nancy, O-M-O-S, nomos, like cosmos, nomos. And then the Hebrews, of course, have the Torah, right? The law that God gives them. But every single, and then you have the Babylonians have the code of Hammurabi, which you've heard about certainly. So it's all the same thing, right? So we can realize that if there is destruction, I just want to go a step further and prepare us. If there is destruction of anything, that's chaos seeping in, right? And destroying everything. Who's responsible for destruction in the ancient Near East? The king or human beings, you follow? So when in the Bible, God says, I will destroy, we have to read it in this context. Is God really, what's he saying when he says, I will destroy? Let's think about that a little bit. Let's anticipate. Well, remember, there's no two forces. Remember, we established that in the biblical context, there's just one God. Yes.
It's like he's gonna take the role of the king and bring the people back to the way that they're supposed to be behaving.
But he's saying, I will destroy. That doesn't sound good. What's he saying when he says, I'm about to destroy X, Y, and Z? Think about it. Yes.
I would say, being intentional of destroying what is right now and bringing something new in its place.
So what do you mean? Elaborate a little bit.
Like maybe, for example, the king gets dethroned and somebody else takes his place, for example. Because you mentioned earlier about chaos, so if chaos sinks back in, then order needs to take place again. So that's where the intervention needs to happen.
Okay, very good. God is intervening, saying, could it be, right? Could it be that God is here warning us chaos is about to seep in? Could it be that it's not a punishment, but information? You follow me? Yes, go ahead.
I believe, when he says destroy, he doesn't mean destroy, he means, to purify because, if you think about it, to destroy something would be with fire. Similarly, in the Old Testament, when you destroy something, you do with fire, you do with heat. When you purify something, you do with water, like a mikvah. You go into a mikvah to purify something, which is why the flood happened.
Ah, you see it more
It's to
symbolic,
Yeah,
but so many
purify.
people died though.
Those that died were those that were impure.
Ah, yes. Be careful. You're taking it too easy right now with this. Oh, they were impure, therefore it serves them right. Careful with that.
Right.
I know we're used to this, right? I'm warning you guys, right? I'm warning you guys. We have to be much less, no offense, we have to be much less nonchalant, right? Relaxed about the death of the wicked. I want to really emphasize this. We've become so cool with it, right? And I want to challenge that. And we're going to see biblically why we should be doing that, right? So wait, I'm just moving your minds and I'm torturing your minds right now, right? We'll get to the text and see some of these things, but right now I'm trying to crack open some new orientations, right? Yes.
So are you taking that same approach the guy from the Bible conference did? I think his name was Ryan, the idea that God is, in Genesis, he's just a sheriff warning people about consequences, and then that kind of.
You know what? Now I see what he was doing. I didn't
Yeah.
make, yes, yeah,
Do you remember my objection to Ryan?
possibly. Remind me what,
And so his argument was that, oh, God isn't punishing people, he's just pointing out the consequences that exist in the structure of the world.
yes.
And my objection
That's
to
right.
that is punishments are consequences. The difference is that a punishment is a consequence you control. So God created the world, those natural consequences from people's decisions are still punishments from God.
Because they're consequences they control?
Yes.
That's your
Because
definition
there's
of punishment.
consequences that God has control. It's both.
Of course, God controls everything.
Like you're still like, it's different than just, I agree with you in that it's a bit like more different, a bit more removed than just, oh, I did something wrong and now God is going to smite me from heaven for doing something wrong. It's a bit more involved where the thing that I did is actually the thing that's causing this consequence that's going
Yes.
to happen to me. But also I recognize that the only reason why it's causing that thing to happen to me is because God set it up to be in that way.
Yes, yes,
So
that's it.
it's a bit of both.
that's it, that's it.
Okay.
He's right. It's both, right? It's on the one hand, God set up the blueprint like this, right? God set up the cosmos to be the law and so forth. So God created the law, right? So yes, on the other hand, then God steps back, right? So whatever's going on here, like Aristotle, he creates the law, steps back, and now whatever's, so it's a combination of both. Of course, he's right, but I'm emphasizing in this class because we never do that, the fact that we, in a way, are responsible for the chaos that comes into the world, right? And instead of going and looking at God, we should be focusing a lot more on our role here. Yes.
So in a way, God didn't do anything.
He created the cosmos.
No, I'm saying about the flood, like in a way, he didn't do anything.
So we'll look,
Yeah.
right? Yes.
That-
There's a warning, right? But that's where I'm going, right? That's where I'm going. We're going to study it in depth, but that's where I'm going. Because of course, my main hypothesis in the class, which I'm going to try to show as we go over and over again the text, is that God is not connected to death in any way, shape, or form. We are, not him. So how can he bring death, right? So that's where I'm going. But I, of course, have to make the argument for that, right? I'm just giving you the hypothesis. Now we have to verify that the text is saying this, right? Which I have to still show. But that's where I'm headed. The flood might have been simply the forces of chaos seeping back in because there was a transgression of the blueprint of creation. Did you follow me? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. All right, just leaving it there for now. Okay, let's go to the king. Any other question or comment? This is a good time to, yes.
So Adam and Eve was like going back and like the blueprint basically, right?
What were they?
Like Adam and Eve basically was like playing into the blueprint, of like destruction, right?
Yes, so there was an element, yeah, chaos starts to come in. They create that, right? With and we'll look at what they did,
So
right?
Why
Yeah.
did God lay down when it comes to the moon? Like, why did he say, what happened to you?
Oh,
You know what I'm saying?
well, let's look at it this way.
Not lay down, sorry.
No, I get it, I get it. Let's see yourself as a parent. Your kid just stole your money or whatever, right? You don't want to immediately accuse you know damn well what happened. You don't want to immediately accuse the kid. You want to try to see if the kid's going to come by himself. And
Okay.
right, so you ask the kid, have you seen my money?
Okay.
You know where the money is, right? But you're trying to like create a conversation, create a rapport so that maybe the kid by himself, right,
Well, then they-
changes his ways. That's kind of what he's doing, I think. Yes.
But if God is omniscient and knows what's going to happen after, God sees all at once, what is to be, what has been, and what is, and what has been before. If God sees all of it at once, why does he need to go through those steps and not just go to the final outcome?
If for our sake, because if he just goes to final outcome, who are we? We got to get there, right? God is there already waiting, but we got to get there. And that's why God is taking baby steps with us, because we got to get there too. He doesn't want to just drag us there, like
what-
kidnap us, you know?
What changes between the books, between Genesis and Exodus? What?
So on the one hand, nothing, because the same God, right? On the other hand, you do see a lot more emphasis on the authority of God, which in my view is an Egyptian influence, Moses, right? But even there, you can still see what you'll see here, right? It's there. I mean, look at the Day of Atonement, right? Moses came up with this. Look how much flexibility, how much grace there is, right? So it's all, nothing changes. It's just there's a cultural shift, but not a theological shift. You follow me? Yeah. All right, this is gonna be tough for some of us, right? I'm deconstructing everything that we've been taught, right? Because once you go to the actual text, you will see very different from what religions teach. So sad, right? Religions very often have been so influenced by the surrounding culture that they've missed and we've forgotten these ancient truths, right? Which I'm trying to rebirth. Okay, let's go to the view on the king. I have a few minutes. Okay, so it's interesting. Of course, I mentioned the king is the one who is responsible for keeping the forces of chaos at bay. But the king in the ancient Near East is also responsible for growing the cosmos, for expanding the cosmos, right? Everybody knows what I mean by cosmos, ordered world, right? So the king is not just responsible in his little city, right, to make sure that everything is, you know, ordered, he is responsible also to expand the order in the world. And that's where you start to see the essential association of the king with war. The king has to then go out and conquer, fight wars, and bring more peoples into the cosmic harmony. You follow? So the king was, his role was both to implement the law, but was also to spread the law and to make sure that the whole world eventually was gathered under this cosmic order. So the king essentially is a warmonger. He has to go to war, not just to be a butcher or, you know, he's there to conquer the world and order it. You see this with the conquest of Babylon, right? They're ruthless, they're violent, they conquer Canaan, they conquer the kingdom of Israel, but the goal is not so much to destroy them as to civilize them. Right? It's a civilizing force. You see this because he takes from the kingdom of Israel the best, the elites, the princes, brings them to Babylon, doesn't destroy them, educates them, right? And then in the land, he sees himself as a civilizing force. I'm bringing cosmic harmony to these, you know, unordered peoples. And so that's wars in the ancient Near East were often fought for the gods in order to expand the ordered world into. So when you go to the book of Joshua, it looks like this. And it seems, and in my view, what's happening is Joshua has adopted the ancient Near Eastern custom of expanding, right? He enters Canaan, conquers everyone for God in order to create order, to get rid of idolatry. He's doing exactly what the nations are doing. And I challenge that. I see a problem there. Why is Joshua acting like a pagan king? That's my question that I'm leaving with you just to torture you all night, right? So do you see the parallels? The role of the kings to do that. Why is Joshua doing that too? Right, the Hebrews, remember, always must demarcate themselves. The God is different. It's a different, supposed to be a very different approach. So I challenge that. And with that challenge, I go back and I start to see more, right? So that's very important to remember what the king is supposed to do. Now, it's interesting because in the biblical text, when you finally have kings, initially you don't have a king, you have God. And then you have prophets. But eventually the Israelites, they want a king too. They want to look good. They think they look stupid without a king. So they ask for a king. And God is disappointed. That's the first moment that you see that there's a problem. God is disappointed. And then watch what God does. Says, okay, fine, you'll have a king, but it will be a special king. First of all, that king cannot own horses. And that king cannot own chariots. What is God saying? Yeah, basically saying that king will not go to war. So you want a king is going to be like peaceful king, right? You're not going to go and conquer stuff for me. That's what he's saying. Why then did the kings in the Hebrew Bible perpetually conquer stuff and accumulate horses and chariots, right? There's a problem. Do you follow? If God meant for the king to not have horses and chariots, why do you have a history of war, right? It's problematic. The biblical text itself has a problem with this. You follow? This is important information I'm giving you already, keys already to start reading these stories, right? The biblical text itself is uncomfortable with the idea of kings going out, conquering nations in order to bring religion to them, right? In order to create cosmos. So, and then this king's not supposed to have too many wives. He can't have wealth, and he has to ride on a donkey. What's he saying? Why is it? What does it say about the king when you see him on a donkey? What do donkeys do? Think Middle East. Have you seen Gaza? What do donkeys do in Gaza?
Donkeys?
Yes, donkeys.
They carry people.
Exactly. Beast of burden, right? What's he saying when he says the king will ride a donkey, not a horse? Everybody, all other kings are riding horses, by the way. Not in Israel, you ride a donkey. What does it mean? What's he saying about the king?
He should be.
Yeah, he should be like, you're serving. You're here to serve, like the donkey, not to be served, like God, right? God is not here to be served. He's here to serve. It's the king reflects the divine image in a way, right? So very interesting that the biblical text is already anticipating what this king will do and trying to rein him in, right? Yes.
Okay, speaking, since you just said, I was going to say, do you think in a sense God was trying to remind the people of what their relationship with him is supposed to be like?
In what way? Tell me.
In the sense you're saying, where God serves people and the king should serve them, because I'm assuming by this point, because they're saying they want a king, and you said God's disappointed. He's trying to use their implementation of
Yes.
king to.
Yes, you see how he's moving along? Kind of, okay, I'll work with that. He's very creative. All right, you want something stupid, let me make it smart, right? So he goes along with God tip, and you see that even there in the depths of, the Pentateuch, way beyond the book of Genesis. That's why I'm saying God is still the same. He's still moving along, working with idiotic humans and fixing, transforming. You want a king? That king will reflect me. That king will be humble. That king will be peaceful. And you have only one king who did that, and it was King Solomon, right? But then he messed up and became very wealthy and had many wives. So, but in general, he was pretty close, right? So the king was supposed to be a symbol of servanthood, right? Not of conquest and power and authority, right? Just like God, like you're saying, supposed to. So you see, he's working with the Hebrews, but at the same time in a transformative way. Okay. I love this window. Okay. Okay. Any questions on that aspect? So I'm anticipating here already on the wars, right? Which will be done by the kings and so forth. But right now, hopefully I've started to create some cracks in the system, right? We are used to seeing the Bible a certain way. We're used to seeing God as the one who can destroy whoever he wants to, because he's the judge of the universe. We're used to associating God with judgment, with death, with destruction. We're used to seeing violence as a necessary evil that God goes along with, right? We're used to seeing God as punishing. I'm starting to create cracks in your system, right? The text is very different from what we have been taught, right? Because you have to remember, for centuries, millennia, the text has been read by ordinary people who were in a certain culture, who lived in a pagan culture, whether they liked it or not. Inevitably, elements of the pagan culture are gonna seep into, not the text. The text is quite firm, but the interpretation of the text, right? We're going to see this, especially in the way Genesis 3, the text of the punishment of women, was interpreted, because you're going to see how the text remains quite pure, but then the interpreters are influenced. And we're going to look how the Greek influence has affected the interpretation of this text, and how when you go to the text, you don't see any of that, right? So you're going to start to see that the text itself is quite, remains quite different. But because we are influenced inevitably by our environment, we're going to look at the text a certain way, right? And we have to be careful to go back and see the text, at least in the ancient Near Eastern context. That's one lens that works, because that's where the text was birthed. So 2 ways to really see clearly the text, in my view, is to go back to the context. The ancient Near Eastern context can illuminate the text, but also the biblical context, the Hebraic worldview. From the Hebraic worldview, you can begin to interpret. But if you start to interpret from a Greek context or Babylonian, you're going to see many things that aren't there, right? Okay, great. All right. Any other questions before I give you your homework for next time? Okay, so you saw I put the syllabus, right? Okay, everybody saw that. So it's a fluid syllabus like God. It's a fluid God, fluid syllabus. But for now, for next time, we're going to start finally reading, studying the text together. And I want to focus on Genesis. What does the syllabus say? Genesis 1 and 2. And then Genesis 3. Okay, yeah. Genesis 1 and 2. So here's what I want you to do. You're going to obviously read Genesis 1 and 2. But then in your reading assignment, you're going to look. So there's a certain way I want you to learn to read so that we get deeper in the text. So remember, we talked about the drash, D-R-A-S-H, the 3 layers, right? Remember, in the Hebrew, we had the pshat, the remez, the drash, the sod. We're doing drash in this class. In other words, we are looking at the text with a questioning mind. That's the approach. We're looking at the text with a questioning mind, not to destroy the text, not to replace the text, but to go deeper in the text. That's my view. The problem is that, people question and then they throw away the text because they don't have the stamina to go deeper. But I want us to do this. We have the questions. Oh, I see something that I don't understand, or I see something that I'm not happy with. You highlight this. If you can highlight this, you will see it will make us go deeper. If you don't question, we stay on the surface, we go nowhere. So I want you to look at the text, and I want you to do 2 things. First, you're going to look at details in the text that seem, why is that detail there? Biblical writers, you have to know, write very succinctly. They write very brief. It's like, usually they don't go into, it's not like Russian literature where they go, and have you read anybody Russian? You probably, they go on and on, the description and this and that. No, biblical writers go straight to the point, right? So if there's a detail that's added, you should notice, you will notice it and be like, why is the author adding this detail? What is it? This will already get you, that's a key that will get you deeper, right? So first thing I want you to notice is these kind of details that kind of seem extra. Like the author, why is he adding this? It seems like he's supposed to go quickly. Why is he adding? You follow me? Right? For example, you have, yeah, okay. There's a tree in the garden, right? So God puts a tree in the garden. And then the text mentions God puts the tree in the middle of the garden. Okay, didn't need to say that. Could just say God put a tree in the garden. Why this extra detail in the middle? Now you should be like, why is the tree in the middle? What's the author? What's the meaning here? Everything, every one of these details has meaning. You follow? Or you have, I don't know, like I mentioned with Abraham, right? Now you will be father of many nations. You should ask yourself, why is God changing his mind? What's the theology behind this, right? So any detail like this, that's very important. So I want you to jot down in the reading assignment 2 details like this that you notice, 2 things that intrigue you. Or maybe you wonder what, so for example, why is the tree in the middle? Yes.
We're reading Genesis now?
Genesis 1 and 2.
All right.
Yes. So you notice, right? You start to notice the details. Anything that seems like that jumps out at you as unusual, like why 7 days, maybe of creation, like that's weird. Why did the author pick 7, right? That's another question you could ask. And you'll see as we do it, you'll learn to get better and better, right? But so first 2 paragraphs is 2 questions, and then you try to answer. Maybe it means this, maybe it means that, this detail, right? Then the second part of the assignment is 2 critiques. Now you're reading and you feel uncomfortable at some point. Something jumps out at you that makes you uncomfortable. Maybe the punishment of the woman, right? Maybe the curse of man, whatever. You tell me about this, right? And what we're going to do in the first part of class is you're going to get in small groups and discuss those together. And then we'll come back together and I'll hear some of your questions. And then I will lecture integrating some of what you have said, right? So it's going to be kind of like that. I'm going to be very attentive to what you noticed because very often I discover things through what you notice, right? Yes, you have a question?
First question. So the first part, we have to write what?
2 questions. So you look at the text and you're puzzled. You're puzzled about something, right? And then the second part is 2 critiques, you're uncomfortable. It bothers you, right? Okay, yes. 2 paragraphs, 2 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs. And then when you write a page total, yeah. When you write the paragraphs, you start to answer. The challenge, you can say, well, maybe that's what it means. You try to begin to interpret, right? You can't go wrong. Imagination is your friend, guys. You cannot go wrong. I love imaginative interpretations. The imagination can get you really amazing places when it comes to interpreting the text, right? So that's the assignment. Make sure you have 2 copies, 1 for me, 1 for you. So I can see a little bit what you guys are doing. And then you remember it counts only if you are on time and in person, right? Yes. Next class, you bring that, having read Genesis 1 and 2, yes.
4 paragraphs, so for the 2 questions, what do we do for those? Do we just leave them for you to answer?
No, you try to answer.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then, of course, I'll look at them and maybe have, yeah. Mhm.
The details of the assignment will be posted on Brightline.
Nope. Yeah, I hope you listened to what I just said. Do you think I have time to go on Bright Space?
This is Genesis 1 and 2.
Genesis 1 and 2.
So just to make sure, part 1, we highlight something that is challenging, for example, like details like the example that you mentioned. And part 2, we highlight something that made us feel uncomfortable.
It's a little different. Hold on. Let me
One of
stop
those.
this.
71, 71.